Hi, welcome to the latest webinar from the Talent Pool webinar series. Hopefully you've caught a few of ours previously. So this week we are talking about cutting through the noise and how to engage your target candidates. As a bit of housekeeping and introduction to me, so this is me, my name is Max Enker. I'm a principal within the Scale Ups team at Talent Pool. Scale ups for us is any business going through rapid growth and really looking to change how they recruit and improve what they're doing. So anything generally from 100 employees upwards with fairly aggressive growth plans. I've been recruiting now for about 8 years, and the last 2 years has been leading talent acquisition functions, both out in Sydney and now in London within tech scale-up businesses, largely in tech, but I've done a bit of everything in recruitment world. You can contact me if you want to have a chat about anything I talk about today or kind of anything else. Got my email address there or my LinkedIn. Everyone who's registered this will receive a follow-up email which will have the content of the video. So if you miss anything, you can always rewatch something or kind of skip through the slides. It's always a little bit weird. I'm now on a screen. I can't hear or see any of you, but you can ask questions. We do have some time at the end for Q&A. So please do submit questions as you think of them through the Q&A box, and we do have some time at the end to go through that. Depending on how quickly I talk through this, we're looking at probably about 30 to 40 minutes, then with a Q&A time at the end. And then finally, although I'm on screen now, I am going to turn off my screen in a second so that you can see the slides properly without my face taking up half of the screen. So look, nice for you to all be seeing me, and look forward to your questions at the end. Thanks. So what are we looking to do today? So the webinar is about talent attraction and how to really get people from the question of who are you to I accept and them coming on board with you. To get started with this, we'll be looking at what the talent attraction funnel is, then how to understand what your target market is, what do people want, what is attractive. Looking a little bit at creating memorable moments, creating messaging and reach outs and experiences, which will mean people remember you and remember what you're doing, and hopefully then be interested in coming to join you. And then finally touching a little bit on how we're going to ensure that your hard work of finding the right people and attracting them actually converts to successes in the end. So to start, talent attraction funnel, I'm sure most of us are used to seeing funnels in our professional worlds. We know the talent journey, and marketing funnels, and recruitment over the years has moved a bit more away from being a purely effort-based environment to being more of a marketing-led approach. So this funnel is often seen in the marketing world of how to generate a sale, and how people go through that journey. In order to hire someone, you basically have to take them through this funnel, taking them from the awareness stage where people find out who you are and what you are as a company, then to be attracting them, making them interested in your company, going further into get people being actually interested in who you are, following you, learning more about who you are. That progresses into them being actually applying for a job or starting an interview process. The hiring is the later stage interview processes, the onboarding, all of the bits around that. And the goal is to create advocates of your new employees. So people who will be brand ambassadors for you to help you attract more and more people into your business. So some great companies who are already doing their advocacy really well. Someone like Atlassian, if you don't know Atlassian, they recently bought Trello, they have Jira, Confluence, loads of other engineering-based tools, and now kind of agile and business-based tools. They've been known to say they don't hire salespeople. The whole company is meant to be an ambassador for the brand and the product, and they're really at the peak of what we'd say is advocacy for their employees. They don't need to do much sales, people do it for them. So if we look at ways of getting talent, there's kind of two main approaches of how you can get talent. The first one there is the talent branding side, the employer branding side, getting people to come directly to you. That can be through job adverts, through referrals, through people coming through your network. So people coming to you. Or the second approach, and in the recruitment space is often a heavily used one, is the getting candidates directly, the approaching or headhunting of talent. And if you look at some stats there, according to Lever, 1 out of 43 candidates who are sourced, so headhunted or approached directly, are hired. Whereas if you are relying purely on getting people to come to you, that number goes up quite significantly to 1 in 109 applicants. So you need to process twice as many people to get the same results from number one as you would from number two. And that number is also then emphasized by the fact that 30% of the workforce is looking for new opportunity at any given time, according to LinkedIn, but almost 90% are actually willing to have a conversation. So if you're relying purely on getting candidates to come to you, you are only playing in that market of 30% of the job market. Whereas if you're working on number two and approaching people directly, you have an extra 57% of the market who you can talk to. In this webinar, we are focusing on number two. Number one is something where across the business, we will be rolling out some more webinars on employer branding, and those would be great if you're really looking to bolster that. But the direct approach is our focus for today. So if you've been keeping up with our previous webinars, you might have heard George and Ben and Evie and Damien doing webinars on the finding of technical talent. So they go into good detail of finding out where people hang out, where they like to be. If they're not on LinkedIn, where else can you find them? How do you find out if they are the right people? You can rewatch these webinars if you go to our website. You can rewatch any of our previous webinars. And if that's something you're interested in doing, I'd highly recommend checking out those two. But some of the main sources which are covered there, so the logos on the right, got GitHub, you've got Slack, AngelList, LinkedIn, Meetup, and Amazing Hiring, all different platforms which can help you really get out there and find different types of technical talent and in other cases non-technical talent as well. So now you know where to find people, you've started to find them. Creating some sort of market map or understanding of where these people sit is great for your own knowledge, but it's also great for leading business conversations. So on the right there is a screenshot of a slide we provided with my current client, where it was a Python market map. So understanding how the Python market looks. So this is great for you to find out what kind of field you're playing in, how many people there are, how often they change jobs, how many jobs are available for them, so you can understand what sort of pool you're playing with. You can also understand your competition, so you can look at who else is hiring, what they are hiring for, how many people they're hiring. And then along with kind of further conversion ratios of, if you know how many people you generally need to interview to get a hire within your business, you can then look at how many people you need to approach, and you can see how many people are on that market. So if you need to interview 50 people per role and you've got 20 roles, you're going to need to approach a lot of people, and you need to then make sure that you are potentially being more successful if your market size of professionals is not that large. And another great use for market map is internally with your hiring managers. We all know recruiting can be very tough, and sometimes you're not getting your results as quickly or as you'd best like to. And market maps can be a great way to showcase what efforts you are doing and potentially where where problems are or where there are some issues, and trying to work around ways of finding better results. So yeah, it's great to use as a showcase of what you're doing and what people are looking at. So now we've found people, or if you've listened to the previous webinars, you hopefully know how to find people. The big question is, how do you actually get them to join your business? So from here, we look at kind of what is attractive. We need to find out what attraction means for the people you are trying to bring in with you. So what do they value? What's important to your target audience? What do they want in a new role? An easy way of kind of getting started is by talking to your existing teams. So find out why your latest software engineer joined the business, or your latest sales hire, what attracted them to join the company, and use that as kind of ongoing selling points. But then companies such as Glassdoor, LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster, Stack Overflow, they generally all do annual surveys or conduct annual surveys on what candidates want and what the growing trends are. So they're great ways of finding out what you should be showcasing and what you should be shouting about to try and get people attracted into your business. So to kind of bring in a few data points from this, there's some stats there on kind of what's important and the top things which are important for people in the current times. So something which has grown over the last few years is companies having a real clear mission and purpose. Previously, 10 years ago, it was potentially okay to have a ping pong table and beers on a Friday and casual working environments. That's really changed because the market has moved to that being fairly standard. So having a clear mission and purpose which aligns with your own thoughts and is really key. And then some of the kind of fairly obvious ones, such as the salary, although salary is no longer the be all and end all, still 93% of job seekers want to know the salary. There is an element of flexibility, but people still want the salary to be within their range. The middle ones, 92 of job seekers want flexibility available. I think given the times we're going through at the moment with COVID-19, this number is probably going to increase, and the type of flexibility people want is probably going to change. That number historically has been some flexibility. For example, time to drop your kids off before school is starting a bit later and finishing a bit later. I think we're going to see a massive shift of people wanting the working from home, or at least some more remote work. So I think there's a big change happening in that one at the moment. Then fairly standard ones, company culture, learning and development, career advancements are always key. But as mentioned there, with the coronavirus impacting flexibility, it's also interesting to see how it's also impacting what we're mentioning in our reach outs. Previously, it could have been talking about the company growth and the latest round of funding and how successful it's been and what they're all doing. Now it seems to be a much more uptake of how are the teams adjusting to remote life, how has coronavirus impacted your business, and reassuring people that despite lockdowns going on all over the world, that people are still running and their businesses are still being successful and teams are still working pretty well. So just a few of the things which you can use to help guide what you're talking about when you reach out to people. So now you kind of know approximately what people want and what you're going to be talking about. We can start going into how you will form your messaging when you start talking to them. A big one here is remember the why. What impact will people have on your business? Why are people joining you? Why are they listening? Why are they reading your message? Why should they talk to you? And then why will they be doing their work, and what will they be enjoying from their work? So really cutting to the chase and saying, look, this is why I'm messaging you, and this is why you should listen to my message. Similarly to finding out why your current employees joined the business, you can also test your messaging and your reach outs and your phone calls with them. have a chat with them and be like, if I sent you this message, would you have responded to it? Give them a few options and have some feedback sessions to find out exactly what their thoughts are. Sometimes it may surprise you what they think. A key one as well, if you send someone a message and you don't have a call to action at the end, it is very easy for them to ignore the message and just carry on as if nothing happened. You read a message, you're like, oh, that's a nice story. And then if there's no call to action, you ignore it. So call to action can be, would you like to have a phone call, or something very simple like that, but just something which says, this is the next step, please respond. And then when you're doing some messaging, make sure to test out a few different things. A/B testing is a great way of seeing what is more impactful, but the thing to be conscious of is don't try and A/B test two completely different messages, because otherwise you won't know what works. So write two versions of fairly similar emails or messages or job descriptions or whatever you're writing. Write two fairly similar ones and then see if the one specific difference you've made in it makes a difference, and then go with that one and then test the next thing. There's loads of tools like Textio and Grammarly and things which can help you make sure you're removing biases and making it grammatically and nice to read. So here I'd like to ask if anyone on the call has received any great messages themselves or sent any messages they're super proud of. If you could please share them via the Q&A. You don't need to actually share the exact context, but just kind of what you messaged and what was great about it. It was great to understand kind of if anyone out there has heard anything great, to add to the examples I'm about to show. So the kind of key things to do when you're doing that messaging, get personal. Don't send out the massive spam emails as such. Don't go on LinkedIn, download a list of 200 people and send them all the same message. People get so many messages now. If you're not personalizing it, they just generally don't listen. But then there is a very fine line between standing out and being personal and being a little bit creepy. So don't mention that holiday you saw because you had a look at their Instagram because you stumbled on it when you Google searched them. There is a fine line, and make sure you stay on the right one. Getting creative. It's good to be different. As we said, we're trying to stand out. We're trying to cut through the noise. You're trying not to be the same as everybody else. So get creative with how you do it. In the next slide, I do show a couple of places where people are being very creative. So it'd be great to see what kind of options you have and how you can be creative. Finally, stand out from the crowd. As we've said, there is many people getting messages all over LinkedIn. There's a lot of noise on there. So stand out from the crowd, try and find their email address and send them an email rather than sending them a LinkedIn message. If you are doing this, do make sure you try and find a personal email address. I'm pretty sure there's many people who don't enjoy getting these sorts of emails to the work email or don't feel comfortable responding it. They might have an IT team who likes to filter through and see what comes in. So some places you have to be careful if you're sending to a personal email address, to a work email address. So some examples of reach out messages. The one on the left, it's a book. It has a phone in it, and this was created by a Dubai-based ad agency who printed a whole bunch of books, cut out a middle bit and stuck in a phone. Obviously, this is quite an expensive way of reaching people. They only paid for the books themselves. The phones were given by a customer, so it's not something everyone can do. But they sent this to 100 of their top prospects as a way of reaching someone directly. From this, they managed to get 4 hires. So it's a very creative way, gets you known across the internet for not being a creative way of doing it, but also did have some results. Obviously not someone everyone can do, but an example of what you can do if you want to go far out the box. And then on the right here, we have a message from one of our directors at Talentful, Catherine. She was working on a marketing role, which was not really finding the results she was, so decided to get a bit creative after reading a LinkedIn article talking about writing a poem as a reach out message. So she decided to send a poem to a bunch of marketing leaders to try and get some results. Although she didn't manage to hire the role from this message, as you can see below there, people did start to respond, and the engagement rates were great, and a lot of people, although weren't successful in hiring for that specific role, really helped with that growing of the future networks and increasing the employer brand, so that next time you talk to these people, they are a lot warmer and you're starting at a much lower point down the attraction funnel than you were in the first place. It's creating that awareness, making people know who you are, making people talk about you. And then these people are probably telling their friends about the message they got. So it's really creating some extra noise. We've got some more normal messages. I won't go into these too much, but it's basically really keeping on those three main points. It's personal, it's directed to the specific person they're messaging, it's got some details about them and what they're doing, it's giving some why about why you should join, it's got a call to action at the bottom, and they're all emails, so they all came from emails rather than being sent as LinkedIn messages. As mentioned, this will come out, so you can have a read of these later if you want to take some inspiration from them, but just to showcase that you don't need to be as creative as sending out a book with a phone or writing a poem to make some good contacts. You can be a lot more basic on what you're doing. Key thing, you send a nice message, they don't respond, you forget about it, and you've wasted a lot of time. You've spent the time personalizing, you've spent the time finding their email address. Just because they don't respond doesn't necessarily mean no, although that is definitely within reason. Your target candidate might not have seen the message. It might have been lost in the 50 other LinkedIn messages they got that week. You might have caught them at a time where they didn't have the time to respond, and they were going to do it later but forgot. So the follow-up is very important, and as you can see by the table on the right, the percentage of the response rate increases quite significantly around the second and third email. So if you're doing just one email and forgetting about it, you're not going to have that many, 15% respond. But if you're sending 3 emails or 4 emails, that response rate goes up to 40%. So make sure you follow up, otherwise you are missing out on a big opportunity here. And then the same rules apply. Be creative, be personal, and have a clear call of action. If you're sending your 4th message, sometimes it's nice to kind of put a bit of a joke in there and say, hey, look, I know you haven't responded. I'm just making sure you haven't fallen in a hole or kind of lost your email, and make a joke of the fact that you know you are following up and double messaging. But again, like with the poem, it's not always a short game. Sometimes you are messaging people for the future. So while the poem didn't have success with that specific hire, it did build that network. So if you're sending a nice message and you're following up, although that person might not join you now, there is a chance that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the line, or even a couple of years down the line, they remember you, and there is a chance that they can come back then. So again, as I said, the hard work, we don't want to waste our hard work. Only 21% of source candidates actually make it to having a screening stage. So this is potentially because you have a little bit more of a message with over LinkedIn or over email, and it's not the right time or it's not the right opportunity. These people are still part of your network, but you have to really make sure that those who do make it through to screening stage, those 21%, that you give them a good experience, and they come through the other end in a better and happier place and more interested place than when you started. So this goes into candidate experience. It's a critical part of your whole recruitment process. I won't go into these too much, but kind of the 3 key statistics on here is that 80% of job seekers would be discouraged to consider future job openings at a company if you don't notify them of their application status. So if you don't give them an outcome, if you don't update them of their process, they are 80% less likely to consider applying again. So if you're looking at software engineers in London, there is a limited market in there. If 80% are dropping out because you're not giving them an answer, your talent pool very quickly shrinks. 40% there is another one. If your first interaction with someone, either the recruiter or the hiring manager, is not great, then up to 40% of candidates would consider withdrawing from the process because of that first interaction. It really makes an impact if you have a nice message. It puts them on a good starting point. If you have a horrible first experience, you're not likely to carry on. And then finally on this page, a critical part, 72% of people have shared their experiences on a review site such as Glassdoor. So if they've had a great experience, then they could put it on there. But as many will know, generally people go online to have a whinge. So it's more likely if someone's had a bad experience, they will go on Glassdoor. They might not leave you a review as a company because they've not worked there, but they can leave reviews for an interview. And so they might say that the recruiter had a bad chat with a recruiter, or they didn't tell me what my outcome was after I had a final interview. It's key to make sure you give people a good experience, because although they might not share it on Glassdoor, if they have a bad experience, they will probably tell their family, their friends, their colleagues. So it's always good to be aware of who finds out about things. And although it's great to give people a good experience with themselves, you are also thinking about the wider network. So some things to think about in the candidate experience. Putting yourself in their shoes is always a good idea. Figure out what you would like to see in a good experience. Most of us would have been for an interview process or through any sort of recruitment process. You know what bad looks like, so try and do the opposite and try and do what good looks like. A few key things here is streamline the process, make it efficient, make it work well, try and make it seamless so that people have a good experience and it doesn't take too long. Ensure you check up on candidates, ensure you're giving them feedback, communicating regularly. And then again, as mentioned previously, with coronavirus and the COVID-19 situation, these additional touch points are more critical than ever. You no longer can bring someone into the office and use that as, you can see the office, you can see the culture as part of the sell point. You need to then go out of your way to do that. If that's doing a virtual tour of the office, a culture brochure, a little bit of an information pack about who you are, what the business is like, a bit of preparation on kind of who people are meeting in the interview processes, that sort of thing. Insights into what it's like when you come on board, and then everyone likes a bit of swag. So just a couple of photos here with different swag boxes, and as many businesses now are remote onboarding. That generally involves sending a laptop via courier. Do you send a laptop with a courier in a plain brown box, or do you have it in a branded box with some swag in it to help make that easier when you can't have that face-to-face time? So candidate experience is key. Basically, throughout the process, the experience you are giving is an experience, is a insight into what it would actually be like to work at your company. So if your reach out messages, your interview processes, your onboarding, kind of everything pre-employment, if that isn't great, then it might be an insight into what it's like working out of business. So if you've got a horrible process of business, people might think that you might have horrible processes once you actually start working there. So it's worth being mindful of what it's like for outsiders. And then we look at the employer branding side. So a lot of people mentioned the awareness phase is a key part of attracting people and a key focus for them. Employer branding is really the bit which focuses on that. It makes your recruitment life easier. If you don't have to sell as heavily when you talk to people, then you can do more of the rest of the process and making sure your candidate experience is great. Showcasing your company's identity and mission, making sure that mission, which is so important to people now, and the culture is available for people to see, and you really then break through the funnel. If your employer brand is good, when you reach out to someone or headhunt someone, they've already bypassed the first 3 stages. They've gone through the awareness, they've gone through the traction, they've gone to the interest. You bring them in halfway through the funnel, and a lot of the hard work is done for you. And as mentioned, this is definitely something which is a big topic by itself. And if you want to know more, there will be further webinars over the coming weeks which are focused on employer branding. We're running a series to cover off various different aspects of this because it is such a large topic, but it really helps you bring down that funnel quicker. So we've come to the end now. So look, hopefully we've had some questions coming through the Q&A box, but as well, if anyone has any reach out messages they've really enjoyed, it would be great to see some of those coming through. So we've had an example come through of a bit of a creative reach out message, as something I've heard of people doing as well. But writing messages for software engineers using a bit of software code. So getting your engineering team to write some code down and use that as the advert. That's definitely not something everyone can do. Like, I'm a tech recruiter, but I definitely can't read or write code. So you would need help to get that done. But I think that's a great way of being a little bit different and standing out. Someone asks, would you recommend to include emojis in a first message or post? What is your experience? I think it really depends on who you are as such. I've found over the years that there is an increase in the amount of emojis used in emails professionally across the board. When I started working, you definitely didn't use an emoji in any professional case, but now you do. I think if you are the type of person to use emojis and it suits your personality, then definitely go for it. I don't think it necessarily hurts. Whether it adds anything, I don't know either. A few years ago, I was not someone who used emojis, and now I am finding I do use them. I haven't seen any change, any uptake on whether it helps or damages. So if it suits you, go for it. If it doesn't, you don't need to. Another question, how much focus should you give on attracting people versus headhunting? So I think it's a good question. You need to really do both. It is key to do both, as kind of mentioned there with the employer branding. Having a good employer brand makes it easier to then headhunt, and would save you time by having some better quality people coming through directly. So if you're an early stage business, you will probably be relying on your network a little bit more and referrals, and you don't have that much brand awareness. So headhunting might be a quicker, more impactful way of getting people now. But as you're scaling, you really need to start focusing on both sides and building out the employer brand as well as your sourcing strategies to make sure you're having more success on both sides. Another question, you mentioned candidates would not apply again in the future if you don't update them on their status. When there is a huge volume, how do you manage this? So big thing around this is automation. A lot of people now, especially in scale-ups or larger businesses, have applicant tracking systems, have software in place to help with automation. The key thing is to be diligent and just make sure you do update everyone. Update doesn't need to be as personalized or as direct as we do with kind of people who are in final stages or offer stages, but make sure you get back to people. I always go by the rule of, if they come in for an interview, then they will get a phone call as an update. If they haven't got there, then an email to kind of bulk reject people is better than nothing. But the most you can do is do as much as you can, basically. Another question, we can't afford swag, fancy stuff, what can we do? Although swag is great, it's not the be all and end all. Everyone loves a bit of swag. it's great at a conference, you go and get some free stuff and it's got some branding. It does help for your brand awareness. I'm sure everyone has seen kind of the backpacks around London, or the bags with the likes of LinkedIn and Google on them. You get to see it around more and more, so people know what's going on. But you don't need to do it. You can do personal touches quite easily in onboarding. Get the hiring manager to create a video or send an email to the new starter and to kind of let them know that they're looking forward to having them join. Have some more personalization, which doesn't necessarily mean you get a water bottle with a company logo on or something like that. Question around GDPR. Do you get better responses via LinkedIn messages or email? Are people not put off in the world of GDPR if you email them out the blue? GDPR is always a complicated one. I think it depends on how you manage GDPR. It's a big story by itself, but email we find generally has a higher hit rate because there is less noise on there, especially in something like software engineering or enterprise sales, where people get a lot of messages. It's harder to break through the noise there in LinkedIn, whereas email, they're more likely to check it. They use it a lot more regularly, and there's going to be less in there. If you email them out the blue, it depends how you got their email address. If it's online, then yeah, that's fine. You can email them, but it just depends how you manage their information afterwards. For example, with Greenhouse, which is our applicant tracking system, every candidate who goes in there does get a GDPR email. So if someone responds, you just have to make sure you comply with the regulations with it. I've personally not seen any issues with people saying, "What, you shouldn't have my data." And if someone says, "Where did you get my email address from?" you just tell them you found it on LinkedIn or you got it from GitHub or something. It's publicly out there, otherwise you wouldn't have got it. Another question, I don't have time to personalize and be overly creative. How can I still compete? So it's a good question, but it depends on kind of the volume you're going for. Often find if you are personalizing, the conversion ratios are so much better than if you are sending mass emails. And we talked about the candidate experience, employer branding. If you're sending mass emails, it's likely not going to have a particularly good impact on your employer brand. Whereas, say if you email 200 people and you get 5 responses, although you might have those 5 responses, the rest of the people have seen your name come up in kind of what they would potentially classify as spam. Whereas if you personalize things, although it might take longer, the results you'd get would hopefully be better. So I'll do one more question. So how do I make my team advocates? It's a tough one. Do you have to give them a good experience, basically? Candidate experience throughout the pre-hiring process, and then to have a good experience while they work as well. Often something like this is in some businesses, it comes naturally because they're just very proud of being there. But in other business, you potentially have to work on it a little bit more. Create a brand ambassador program to try and encourage people to do it, to share more, just to kind of see what you can do. So it's something which I've seen done and I've rolled out previously is to really help people do this. If you create a brand ambassador program, help give people some sort of guidelines about how they can message about their company. A lot of people are just a little bit apprehensive. They don't know if the marketing team would be happy with their messaging if it's on off brand, if you're posting on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter about the company, does it align with company branding? So a lot of times you are welcome to do what you want, but if in doubt, marketing teams are often very happy to give you some guidance and help point you in the right direction of what you can shout about. So it's often just giving people a nudge in the right direction is a great way of helping them start to be advocates and shouting about what they do. So we've come to the end. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope you found something useful for this, and thanks for the questions. As mentioned, we do have a whole bunch more webinars coming up. You can keep track of what we're doing through our website, talentful.com/webinars. We do also have a meetups.com page where we are sharing what's going on. For more information on what we do and how we're helping businesses really skyrocket their talent acquisition process, have a look at talentful.com, reach out to me or one of the team to have a chat. But thanks very much for your time, and have a great rest of your day and a long weekend for all of those in the UK. Thanks.